Bom, boa tarde, good afternoon. We are going to do this panel in a mix between Portuguese and English. So, to begin in English, let me ask you both. The next 1 billion people, are they going to be able to do self-custody?
Yeah, so that's a very good question, thanks. So the next 1 billion people, I think it's technically impossible for them to hold an UTXO, hold a Bitcoin on-chain UTXO. I'm not like too well versed in like the technical details, but people that know better, like James and Loeb and stuff, can give this argument in detail. So I don't think it is possible, and also like the UTXO size would be probably too small, so the transaction fees would be prohibitive to hold such a small amount of Bitcoin. So it's definitely going to be either a Lightning network without the possibility to basically go on chain. So I don't think we really understand what it means, but when that problem arises, we will be able to solve it. That's what I strongly believe. Or besides Lightning Network, probably some stuff like Fedimint or Cashew, eCash. So it's not going to be on chain. People that will have like 10, 20,000 sats in Bitcoin, even though it can be quite a lot in terms of purchasing power, it won't be simply possible to hold that as an on-chain UTXO. Even now, that would be prohibitive because the transaction fee for like a single UTXO can be like 1,000, 2,000 sats, so you don't want 10,000 sats worth of UTXO. So it's going to be definitely, there might be something like a self-custody, but it's not going to be on the base layer. It's going to be on the upper layers of Bitcoin.
Perfect. And Ella, so what do you think about Lightning and other side chains and second layers solutions, and what's the future of it, and also what's the technical challenges I mean, Lightning probably doesn't fit 1 billion people as well.
No, thank you, Caio, for the question, and thank you everyone for being here. I'm really glad to be in Brazil with you all. My name is Ella Hough. To start, I think it's perhaps we can contextualize sort of where we are, because I know this panel is titled The Next 1 Billion People. But really, so River, last in 2023 in the summer, they published that they think only about 80 million people use Bitcoin in self-custody or on an exchange. And so I'm sure we're all very familiar with the S-curve of adoption. And so this first 2.5% in the innovators, that's about 200 million people. And then once we get up into the next, kind of the early adopters, that's 13.5%, that's kind of 1 billion people. So that's when we're getting there. And what I think is important is what's the mentality of those people in the innovators and the early adopters. A lot of them are open to new ideas and to change. And I think especially for me, my generation, young people, we have less assumptions than perhaps others, or we're more open to challenge those. Also have perhaps less at stake in the current system as it exists. So my point here is that I think self-custody is really important, and understanding the features and the values of Bitcoin and why we need to preserve those into the future. I'm not the one to answer the technical capabilities of Lightning and other L2s. I think largely from what I can tell right now, the L2 development, most of it's going to not work. I'm very skeptical of most of it. But an analogy that I think is helpful that I was honestly thinking of as we have these QR codes to translate and scan. So I don't speak Portuguese, I wish I did. But I can use Google Translate or some app, and in that moment, I have access to Portuguese, that meaning. But if I don't have my phone, I don't have it anymore. And so I kind of look at the custodial or ETFs or anything when you don't have a seed phrase as that like handy, convenient, you sort of have it, but ultimately you're not maintaining that meaning. And so as we bring in younger people, I hope we can figure out solutions where they are truly holding Bitcoin.
Perfect. E Kaká, puxando para você agora, a gente sabe que lugares diferentes do mundo têm necessidades muito diferentes em relação ao Bitcoin. E aí a gente está conversando com um europeu, com uma americana e com 2 sul-americanos. E eu sei que você já viajou bastante em várias conferências, etc. Então, como você vê essas diferenças de necessidade para adoção em regiões diferentes do mundo?
Boa, Caio. Esse ano eu tive a oportunidade de passar por vários países, participar de diversas conferências e realmente existem necessidades muito diferentes. Necessidades de linguagem, necessidades de experiência de usuário. Às vezes um aplicativo que funciona aqui no Brasil, muita gente acaba utilizando o Pix para compra de Bitcoin, não vai ser a mesma usabilidade, a mesma forma de comprar de alguém na África, de alguém nos Estados Unidos. Então, sim, existem essas necessidades que são bem diferentes. E, claro, a gente não vai conseguir abraçar um mundo, cada região vai ter que ter o seu núcleo de desenvolvimento, né, desses aplicativos dentro da linguagem que as pessoas já estão habituadas e que seja de uma maneira fácil para elas.
Ok. E você acha que o Bitcoin precisa mudar alguma coisa para caber tantas pessoas novas? Ou, no fundo, a gente escala isso por segundas camadas, por soluções sidechains, lightnings, etc. Porque a gente vê esse debate na comunidade. Pô, se a gente fizesse um soft fork no Bitcoin, a gente conseguia adaptar ele e fazer alguma coisa diferente. Como você vê essa discussão? Porque, no fundo, muito dessa discussão de escalabilidade passa por pessoas querendo mudar o Bitcoin e outras pessoas achando que não, a gente tem que manter o Bitcoin conservador e a gente cresce em camadas.
Sim. Eu acho que fazer mudanças no Bitcoin é um risco. A gente nunca sabe quais são as consequências dessas mudanças. A gente teve, por exemplo, recentemente, em 2021, a ativação de Taproot, que acabou, como consequência, trazendo ordinals para o Bitcoin, né? Então, eu acredito que é um risco fazer essas mudanças. O que, na verdade, a gente precisa não é mudar o Bitcoin, mas sim trazer mais pessoas para trabalharem no ecossistema do Bitcoin, desenvolvendo novas soluções que ajudem mais pessoas a adotarem o Bitcoin, que seja mais fácil tanto o uso quanto a autocustódia. Eu vejo que isso sim vai trazer mais adoção do Bitcoin, mas não mudar ele.
No, perfect. And you talk about the personality traits of different phases of adoption, and as a scientist, I really remember a phrase of Max Planck, the science advanced from funeral to funeral, meaning that old people and old way of thinking needs to go for young people to advance the knowledge. But do you agree that with Bitcoin, or are we able to educate older people to bring them together with us?
I think to what Kaká was just saying, it's really important to incorporate the perspectives of everyone. To have so you made the comment, you basically need older people, their knowledge to perhaps exit, and then younger people come in. I don't necessarily think that's the case, especially in Bitcoin. I think being able to pass down on a peer-to-peer level the importance of digital scarcity, and decentralization, immutability. We need to understand these values and features. And I hear a lot of times people ask, what do you think is the biggest concern to Bitcoin? And I agree with people's answer of not sharing the importance of these features with younger people. People get in and think, oh, I just want to change it, I want to do that. But I'm very early still in my journey, and I think it's important, as Kaká was saying, to really not be hesitant or very fast to change, to think very purposefully. With that being said, I think it's still good to have the conversations. Like I know right now in the US, in Boston, there's a conference going on trying to have thoughtful discussion around these challenges.
Yeah, so on the generational question, it's very interesting to take a look at the age statistics for Europe and Africa. For example, Germany, I believe the median age is around 45 years old, so that means more than 50% or 50% of the people are older than 45. And for places like Nigeria, it's like 21 years old. So like many countries in Africa are very young populations, 50% of the population basically teenagers or younger. So that's one reason why I see that Bitcoin is easier to explain maybe in places like Africa. I don't know what's the population statistics like around South America, but I would imagine it's closer to Africa than Europe. So I sometimes say that the hardest like personality to explain Bitcoin to is like a middle-aged Westerner, because they have the possibility to protect themselves against inflation through stock investment, through real estate. They basically can capture some of the country-loan effect. For Africans, that's not possible. They don't have any, usually they don't have any way to protect themselves from the inflation. So that's the second reason why Bitcoin is usually better, or it's sometimes, or many times it's much quicker for the people to get it in Africa, because first they're usually much younger and used to like mobile money. And second, because you don't need to explain that fiat money doesn't really work well for them, because that's very obvious all across Africa, and they don't have any way to protect themselves against the fallout of the fiat money.
Yeah, just to add a little bit of color of what you were saying, I remember when I was in El Salvador in 2021, and I was in a hostel. It was me, another Argentinian, and two guys from Germany. Me and the Argentinians understood clearly why Bitcoin. The German people didn't. And why? It's because what you talk about, but also they trust their government. They trust their system. They don't have a memory. Like they only read in books like what the government can do bad with you. And here in Brazil, we had hyperinflation. We had confiscation of all assets from our government. In Argentina, that happened as well. So yeah, definitely, 100%. But since we were talking about boomer, just let me talk that I agree 100% with you. So let me make a provocative question. Could we call the ETFs part of the adoption and like a second layer for boomers?
I mean, I think how you define adoption, how are you defining adoption? That's a question itself. What are you considering? But if we're talking about, I love Debify's phrase, own your money. Owning an ETF is not owning your money. That is not getting all of the full values and benefits of Bitcoin. So you might get, the financial upside. Your fiat might go up in an ETF. I know a lot of people, at least in the US, I'm not quite sure how it works in Brazil, but if you have a retirement account, it might just make the most sense for you to have it through that. But if what we're after is really freedom money that protects the individual, you're not getting that in an ETF.
Yeah, I agree, but that raises another question. The majority of the side chains, you don't have sovereignty as well. Like even in Lightning, I would say 95% of users don't open their own channel and this sort of thing. So could we count that as adoption as well?
Well, yeah, that's a tricky one. Usually, the way I explain it and the way we work with this, like the self-custodial question in Trezor Academy is, I explain it as a sort of progression. So you start out naturally, if you have like $1 worth of Bitcoin, you start out with a custodial Lightning like Blink or Wallet of Satoshi. It's fine, it's a fine trade-off because you don't put that much in risk. But if you have like $100 worth of Bitcoin, you should graduate up to Phoenix maybe, where you don't have to really handle everything about Lightning, but you write down the seed and you can recover the wallet, so you are self-custodying your Bitcoin. If you own even more than that, like $500 to $1,000 and more, then you should get a hardware wallet. You should have like a true on-chain UTXO under your control. So I'm not like too critical of like custodial solutions if there's like that common understanding that you need to level up as you increase your holdings. And on the ETF question, I used to be very critical of the ETFs. I think the biggest risk there is it's a huge honeypot either for the government or some kind of hackers. And this honeypot is ever more tasty for someone to just take a bite out of it. on the other hand, with the boomers, as you said, it's a huge like stamp of legitimacy, basically, to see like BlackRock and Fidelity and all these huge asset managers to offer like the way, like it's a legitimacy to have this form of investment. You cannot no longer call it a scam if you have these ETF providers. So that's probably the biggest benefit of ETFs.
Concordo inteiramente. I agree 100% with you. And Kaká, você que tem a maior escola de educação do Bitcoin do mundo, no fundo deve ter sentido isso muito na conversa com seus alunos. Então, eu queria te perguntar isso. Na visão de vocês, o ETF facilita bastante a adoção porque diminuiu o risco reputacional da pessoa se envolver com Bitcoin? Ou isso é uma consideração mais para as instituições e menos para as pessoas físicas, e as pessoas físicas meio que ouviram do ETF, mas já estavam interessados mesmo assim?
Boa, Caio, o que acontece é com o surgimento dos ETFs, tem muita gente perguntando se vale a pena comprar Bitcoin através dos ETFs. O que acontece é que muita gente do mercado financeiro tradicional está estimulando com que pessoas comprem Bitcoin através de ETFs. Na área Bitcoin, o nosso trabalho é justamente mostrar que, através de ETFs, você não consegue fazer a sua própria custódia. O Bitcoin, na verdade, não é seu, ele fica na mão de terceiros, ele fica na gestora, né? Então, eu acredito que essa não é a melhor maneira da gente fazer um onboarding das pessoas, né, de quem está chegando. Aliás, eu acredito que ETFs, na verdade, é para instituições e não para as pessoas. As pessoas, elas podem e devem comprar Bitcoin de forma direta e fazer a sua própria custódia. Então, eu vejo que o ETF ele é um produto inevitável no mercado financeiro, mas não voltado para as pessoas, porque o ETF não traz soberania para elas.
Perfeito. E no fundo, então dá para fazer um mix da resposta do Josef com a sua, que é assim, qual é a grande diferença entre um ETF e uma solução em segunda camada? Uma solução em segunda camada, você está progredindo para algo. A solução do ETF não te permite progredir. Qualquer momento que você queira sair do ETF, você já vai ter que pagar um imposto, você já se colocou num lugar que você não tem uma progressão. Enquanto, se você começa na Lightning não rodando o seu nó, não tendo o seu canal, de repente você pode puxar uma carteira nova e começar, a Phoenix, por exemplo, e começar a gerenciar seus próprios canais. Você pode depois transferir para um chain. Então, tem uma trilha de conhecimento, uma lógica aí que faz sentido, que quando você começa via um ETF, não tem, você tem o primeiro passo e aí daí travou. Então, assim, na minha visão pessoal é que assim, o ETF é muito importante como propaganda, como validação social, como está na boca da mídia, está na boca de mais pessoas. No fundo, antes a gente tinha que lutar muito para convencer as pessoas do porquê o Bitcoin. Agora a gente ganhou o Larry Fink falando a favor do Bitcoin para a gente, e agora a gente tem que convencer muito mais a importância da soberania e da autocustódia do que ficar explicando qual é a diferença do Bitcoin e das shitcoins. Isso, agora a gente tem a BlackRock explicando para a gente a diferença. Então isso, eles ajudam muito a adoção, mesmo sendo um ETF que é esse caminho que pausa. E aí, I would like to bring you guys back again in English and ask, in your mind, when you think about the next billion that is going to adopt Bitcoin, do you think about, oh, okay, maybe in Africa we're going to have a hotspot because there's more people there? No, maybe in India. No, maybe in Europe because people have more access to information. I mean, where this next billion is coming from? The majority of it, because it's coming from all over the place, of course.
Yeah, so I'm very bullish on Africa. What I've seen at the Africa Bitcoin Conference and adopting Bitcoin Cape Town, it's very optimistic. The tools that people like KG, Machankura are building, it's something that Americans or Europeans wouldn't come up with because we don't understand the contextual problems and use cases that people in Africa have. And so yeah, Africa has over 1 billion people on the continent, and it seems that if you explain Bitcoin properly, as we are trying to do with the Treasury Academy meetups, Bitcoin, people are very quick to like adopt Bitcoin with smaller amounts, very carefully at the beginning, because there's a lot of scams in Africa as well. But I believe there's a term connected to Africa that's called leapfrogging, to basically jump over the technical development step. Like they went from basically sending like physical mail to mobile phones without the landlines. And I believe with finance, with money, with currency, this is also happening. There's a huge unbanked population in Africa. In many places, it's more than 50% of the population that don't have any bank accounts. And they won't ever have bank accounts. They will have Bitcoin wallets.
Yeah, so I think through fiat money, we're all being stolen from, just at different rates and speeds. I would agree with what Josef was just saying. I think it's going to be, I hope, from young people, and I don't know if it's correct, but kind of a reverse quintillion effect is how I sort of think about it. So right now, the closest you are to the money printer, you have the ability or the convenience to not really question what is money, what am I using, but the people that today are furthest from the money printer and are feeling this pain and asking themselves, what is money? How do I save my value? I think that's where we will see more adoption. So from younger people and from people like in Africa or other parts of the world where they are just being stolen from drastically.
Well, perfect. Kaká, você tem uma visão sobre isso? Tipo, da onde você acha que vai vir a maior parte da adoção, assim? Do sul global, seja América Latina, África, Índia, o pessoal que tem essa dor com o sistema tradicional mais latente, ou, querendo ou não, o sul global tem menos acesso à informação, então é muito mais fácil um americano encontrar educação no YouTube e se interessar do que um latino-americano ou um africano, por exemplo?
Até poderia dizer que até alguns anos atrás a gente não tinha muita informação aqui no sul global, a gente está falando de Brasil, Argentina, América Latina, na África, mas muitos projetos nos últimos anos surgiram de educação. Nossa, tem muita coisa legal acontecendo para ajudar as pessoas a entender sobre o Bitcoin, e eu acredito que é daí que vai surgir a maior parte da adoção, porque a gente vive em países que têm crises inflacionárias, a nossa moeda está derretendo, isso é um cubo de gelo, e as pessoas estão cada vez mais percebendo isso. Isso está muito claro para a maioria das pessoas. Então, quando alguém vai no supermercado e compara o que tu conseguia comprar alguns anos atrás com o que tu consegue comprar agora, é dessa forma que as pessoas conseguem visualizar, nossa, realmente, meu poder de compra diminuiu. E aí tu começa a explicar como que Bitcoin pode ajudar essas pessoas a manter seu patrimônio e como é uma ferramenta de liberdade, as pessoas ficam realmente curiosas e interessadas sobre isso. Estive esse ano também em Oslo e tive essa mesma impressão que acho que o Josef comentou, que as pessoas lá não estão muito interessadas em Bitcoin. Elas confiam muito no sistema, tudo funciona como elas esperam. Então, não há muito esse interesse em usar Bitcoin, adotar Bitcoin. Aqui, na América Latina, é totalmente diferente. As pessoas querem aprender sobre isso, buscam sobre isso. Claro, muitas vezes, pela primeira vez, é de uma maneira especulativa, mas esse é um caminho, muitas vezes, natural, né? Você entra pela volatilidade, pelas notícias da bull run, do Bitcoin, e aí você acaba descobrindo que Bitcoin é muito mais do que isso, e acaba aprendendo sobre a história do dinheiro, como o dinheiro é criado, sobre o sistema fiat. Isso acaba causando uma mudança tão grande de mentalidade, né? E, enfim, vem daí a adoção do Bitcoin, desses países que sofrem com suas economias. Eu acho que vem daí.
Perfect. What's interesting about that, that's normally we listen about the adoption curves as it would start with store of value and only after it would arrive in the stage of medium of exchange. But in South America, in Africa, normally, as you say, they leapfrog stages. And a lot of people, even in El Salvador, they are not able to save money, but they need a good tech to transaction money. So, I don't know, I mean, that's very interesting. Have you ever reflect about it?
Yeah, that's true. You can see that, for example, in Bitcoin Ekasi, where the kids, the surfer kids, like Bitcoin Ekasi is very connected to the Surfer Kids project, where kids from poor communities are taught some exercise through surfing, and they get their allowance in Bitcoin, And for the first time in their life, they're basically able to do like a digital transaction if they have a phone or they have an NFC card. And what was interesting to me to hear is that in the townships, like in the slums in South Africa, Bitcoin has this like safety aspect because you don't have to carry around like cash, and which is frequently stolen. But with Bitcoin, that doesn't get really stolen because the thieves don't understand it. So that's one of the use cases we don't really see in Europe or US, that you would use Bitcoin because it's safer than using the fiat currency.
So they start to do more savings in Bitcoin because of it, and they were not able to do savings in fiat money because of it?
Yeah, that's part of it. First, because the fiat money, the cash, got stolen, either by some random thief or even by the family. If you see the documentary, The Silent Bitcoin Revolution in Africa, there's one kid that explains that his family was basically stealing the cash from him. And yeah, if you hold on to it, with Bitcoin, usually you get it at some point, especially in the bull markets, that you should be holding on to more of your money because it really pays off. Yeah.
So I think your question was a bit, will we follow a linear path between store of value, mean of exchange, unit of count? I love patterns, I love frameworks. Like I like thinking about the S-curve adoption, this path, but really there's no priors to Bitcoin. I think sure frameworks are helpful, but I really think the future, I'm very hopeful about all the future will hold, and I think we can't even perfectly describe it. I love thinking about Bitcoin as this language that all 8 billion people can speak, and I'm just really grateful to see what's going to come from that.
Bom, temos 1 minuto, então, Kaká, e você, você acha que essa questão da reserva de valor versus meio de troca, como isso afeta a adoção assim, de uma pessoa média? Tipo, você consegue adotar o Bitcoin só como meio de troca e depois você vai perceber a reserva de valor?
Depende. Depende do primeiro contato que a pessoa tem com o Bitcoin. Muitas vezes, dentro de uma economia circular, por exemplo, o estímulo inicial que existe é para que as pessoas usem. Então, ela vai aprender através da usabilidade. Tem gente que vai aprender de outras maneiras, vai aprender e vai ter a primeira visão do Bitcoin como uma reserva de valor. Então, depende. Eu acho que o que importa é que as pessoas comecem. Né? Que elas se interessem, que elas busquem informação e comecem. Não importa se é através da usabilidade ou se é através de um ouro digital. Né? Então...
Bom, meu papel aqui é provocar, né? Mas eu concordo totalmente com ela que, assim, no fundo, a gente tem uma montanha e a gente tem o quê? Vários caminhos diferentes para poder subir na montanha. Não é que tem um caminho só. Então, tem gente que começa com reserva de valor, tem gente que começa como meio de troca e está tudo bem. Não é que tem uma resposta correta, tem o que a realidade da pessoa proporcionou para ela. Mas não importa se ela encontra o Bitcoin como meio de troca ou como reserva de valor, ela está encontrando uma tecnologia monetária superior e, assim, querendo ou não, no final das contas é uma mera comparação de características técnicas. E se você compara características técnicas do Bitcoin com o dinheiro fiat, o resto é uma questão de tempo.
And I might just add, there's a new paper that came out pretty recently about how important exchange is for value. And I would really recommend everyone reading that if you're able.
Perfect. So, pessoal, a gente já estourou o tempo, então, muito obrigado. Thank you very much.
Obrigada.
Thank you.